welcome to Psychology for Geeks. I'm Elizabeth, and today I'm really excited about this video. I had a great conversation with Charlene from NAT20 Therapy. The name is amazing, and we talked about sort of like different trainings, how to use TTRPGs in the therapy session, and sort of her own journey opening her own private practice. And yeah, we geeked out a lot, and I think there's so much that we can learn from her experience. So if you're thinking of opening your own practice, then check out this video. I hope you like it. Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I am cold.
Yeah.
I live in California, and usually in this area around this time of year, it's like 100 degrees plus. But this morning it's kind of cold. So I'm cold.
I'm just cold because our air conditioning, my husband loves our air conditioning to be like on blast as soon as it's like over 70 degrees. And I literally was sitting here with a client beforehand, like rubbing my arms. I was like, I'm so cold, I'm freezing. And I went and turned it off.
All right. So we're both cold.
Yeah, we're both cold.
Okay,
but
so
I'm always cold or hot.
I kind of wanted to start by asking you, how did you come up with the name for your practice? Because I love it so much.
Well, so I believe it or not, there's actually a funny story behind this. I was like, okay, obviously I want the word nerd in there. I don't necessarily identify as a geek a lot of the times because I'm not like super techie or anything like that. Not into video games. Tend to be more into the tabletop stuff. So I was like, okay, nerd, that seems to fit me pretty well. And I was like, nerd therapy, that's great, but there's probably somebody already out there that's using nerd therapy. And I kind of wanted to represent the growth and the change that was going to happen, in therapy, whether it be individual or, in group. And I was like, adventure, because my one friend, when we went hiking, actually called me Adventure Gnome. That was my trail name. And so I was like, Nerd Adventure Therapy. And so I said this, I actually told my home game, D&D guys, D&D people, that I was like, hey, this is what I'm going to call my practice. And my DM that's known me for 6-7 years, somewhere around there, it's like, you should add a 20 on the end. I was like, why? He's like, the abbreviation would be NAT20. And I was like, you're right, that's awesome. So I just went ahead and added the 20 at the end, and that's how it was born. I was like, we can, because when you roll a NAT20 in D&D, it's really good. I'm like, go out and roll some NAT20s in life. Yes.
Yeah, so when I first saw it, I was like, this is genius. It's like so simple, short, and it really lets people know like what type of therapy you'll be doing or you'll be walking into. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, no questions. No, exactly what you're getting.
Yeah, so since we're on that topic, what led you to open your own practice, like centered on like TTRPGs?
So I actually opened my own practice, my private practice, back in 2014 when my son was born. Just out of necessity, because my husband and I needed to have opposite schedules for daycare, that type of stuff. So I've had it since 2014. And I actually went to go interview at St. John's College in Annapolis for a salaried job because, as a private practitioner, if people don't show up, you don't get paid. And so it was really hard financially for us right at that point. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go get a salaried job with time off and things like that. Keep my private practice, but make the salaried job the main job. And it was around that time that I've been playing D&D since 2004. Yeah, 2004, in college, playing personal games on and off, since then. had a couple of really good sessions with, again, my DM that I've been with for quite a while. There was like a really good session, and I was like, you know what? Like, this makes me feel really good. It brings up my social anxiety. So it's like, maybe we could use this as a tool, right? And that was like in 2017. And then I did an interview with my college job until 2019, the fall of 2019, before the world shut down. And I said to him, I said, hey, look, this is something I want to do. I want to run D&D therapeutic groups. And my boss looked at me, and my coworker looked at me and was like, okay. They were just
really
super supportive. Yeah, they were like, that'll fit our population perfectly. And so I started putting things together. At that time, there wasn't really many resources. Take This had put out Gardens of the Fog, which I highly recommend going to look at. It was a collaboration between Wizards of the Coast and Take This. And Take This is, I think it's one of the original, if not the original, like TTRPG, let's use TTRPGs as a therapeutic tool, like type of company. And so I took the Gardens of the Fog and I used it for my first group, and they loved it. And I had people the first time I was like, oh my God, this works. And I'm going to base my entire career off of this. I had someone playing in a game who was very religious, brought up very religious in the Jewish faith, but was on the LGBTQ spectrum. And so didn't feel very supported by their faith. And they just so happened to play a cleric in this game. So, for anybody out there that doesn't know what a cleric is, it's a holy person that heals people, pretty much. Like that's one of the forms, and that's the form that they played. And by the end of the campaign, we had to go through an illusion. Each person had to go through like their worst fear or something like that, their character's worst fear. And this person had picked, darkness and being alone and, stuff like that. And so I had them running through the darkness, trying to get out of, wherever with nothing around. And of course, their first response was to run. And it was to yell for help. And I was like, nobody hears you. You're all by yourself. And they were like, oh, well, then I start focusing in on my holy symbol for my god or whatever, my deity that, the cleric. We didn't actually know the name of the god either. We didn't pick it. We just were like, my deity. And after they did that, I was like, oh, there's a little light. You get closer and closer to the light. They're like, I head towards the light and I concentrate on my faith and I concentrate on the strength through faith. And I was like, okay, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. And then the illusion goes away, right? And at the end of that session, this client looked at me and was like, I can use my religion as a strength. And I was like, yeah. Yeah, you can. You don't have to listen to all the naysayers and things like that. It's something personal to you that you can use this to strengthen and support in everyday life. And they were like, oh yeah. And I was like, holy crap, it worked.
So at this point, this is one of like the first few games that you did, right? And this was at the college, or was this in your private practice?
Is at the college.
Oh, okay. So at that point, have you had any sort of like training, or did you know anybody else who was doing something similar, or were you just kind of like, this sounds like fun, let's do it?
Let's do it. So I started at the college without, without any formal training because there was nothing. It just Game to Grow and Geek Therapeutics, they were out there. I just hadn't come across them, or, I don't know if I'm pretty sure the training program started pretty recently, in the past few years. I think, oops, sorry, that was my fault. Their training didn't start, I think, until like at least like 2019, something like that. So that's when I started looking around, because I wanted to make sure I was, doing it justice, right? Like as a clinician, you always worry about ethics, right? And, making sure that you're doing something, especially if it's innovative, that you're doing something that isn't hurting people or wasting their time or whatever, right? Like you got to think about ethics. And so I was like, okay, let me go look and see if anybody's kind of come up with this or whether I got to come up with this on my own, right? And that's when I found Game to Grow. And they were like, hey, by the way, we're starting a certification program. Do you? And I was like, yes, please. And so I asked my college, I was like, because they had funds for trainings and stuff like that. I was like, hey, can I get this certification? They were like, yeah, sure. And so
that is like, okay, that's like the best case scenario. Like at first when you were like, yeah, sure, you can do, you can run some like D&D games or whatever in practice. Yeah. I was like, wait, like not even now. We still get like, I will get looks like you're talking about movies in therapy. Like, are you even doing therapy kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like a really great place to work at.
Yeah. And they're super supportive. And knew that the population was going to respond to it. And that's, as a college therapist as well, the hardest part of getting college kids into groups is like just getting them there, right? So it's like, so it's like make it interesting and then maybe they'll show up. Also, I had pizza on my first session because I was like, hey,
I was gonna get them to come
get some pizza and play some D&D to try and get them excited about it. But yeah, so they were like, yeah, we'll pay for the training, that's fine, we'll pay for the certification. So the certification I think took maybe like 6 months or something like that, maybe a year, because you had to go through and do all the trainings, which there were 3 levels. Each training was 7 hours long. And then you had to go through consultation groups, and then be certified, through another process. But it was great. I loved it. I got to learn from the one half of the original founders of Game to Grow, does the trainings. Dr. Elizabeth Kilmer is also awesome, and she does the trainings as well. And then for my consultation group, my group facilitator was, or still is, Adam Johns, which is the other half of the founders of Game to Grow. So it was really awesome to like talk to these guys who have been doing it for 10 years and they kind of figured out, okay, here's the theory base. Here's, what we're looking at. Here's some research that kind of backs it up, because we're in the beginning, right? Like there's not tons of research out there. And so I was like, okay, this is great. This is exactly what I needed to feel confident in that this is something that can legitimately be used and just needs to be studied more to follow through with the anecdotal evidence. You know what I mean? So I did that. And then, what year is it? Oh, it's 2022. Sorry, I'm like, I don't even know what year it is. At the beginning of this year, I went ahead and went through the Geek Therapeutics certification course. So I'm certified times 2, which was amazing as well. They actually did it to where you were, you had coursework and things like that. So I got 12 CEUs out of it, which is amazing. And then every other week you would play D&D with your cohort. And on the other weeks you would, on Friday night, you would play a different RPG game and talk about how it's therapeutic and how you can apply it, and all those different kind of things. So that's why I signed up for it, because I want to kind of expand to other RPGs, because other RPGs definitely have benefits that would help in group therapy and things like that. That was amazing. That was so much fun to be in the cohort, and just we played, I remember all the games we played. We obviously played D&D. My character was Vixie. She was a gnome monk, and she just like the hi cha all over the place. She was just running and punching people. And then at the end of the games, we would talk about how that might be therapeutically applied, right? So it was a really, really good program. Both Game to Grow and Geek Therapeutics. There are definitely different programs, but they each are amazing. So I took those to kind of get those certifications. And again, it wasn't necessarily for the certification, it was for my own ethical standards. I wanted to make sure, again, I'm a CBT therapist, cognitive behavioral therapist. I want to make sure there's some research behind it, that there's some, way of explaining it in a way that theoretically makes sense, and is beneficial. So sorry, long answer for.
Oh, that was great, because that kind of covered the question that I was going to ask you, which was would you recommend that people get certified, as a GM or as a geek therapist?
Yes. So the cool thing about Game to Grow is that they actually have 3 different tracks. They have a mental health track, which is the one I went through because I'm a therapist. They have an educator's track. If you wanted to run therapeutic games in your school or whatever as a teacher, you could do that. And then they have a community member. So if you wanted to, do a game out in the community just for a bunch of kids or whatever, you could totally do that. So that's Game to Grow. And Geek Therapeutics, there were people from all over, different jobs, different places, all over getting the training. And I really do think if we're going to legitimize this as a therapeutic tool through research and, to other professionals and things like that, it is best to get whatever training you can get a hold of. Now, again, trainings cost money, and, that's the hard part, right? But any consultation you can seek out with someone who's been doing this for a while or has the certifications or whatever, I would highly recommend it, so that we can legitimize the field.
Right. So I was having a conversation with someone else a few weeks ago, and I was watching the video again. Because my brother was editing it, and then we were talking about the same thing, about how sometimes parents, they're oh, they might be oh, are you actually doing therapy? It just seems like you're just geeking out with my child. I don't know if that's something that's legitimate or not. And then I was well, we are using evidence-based things. We're just dressing it up to make, to help us pay attention, or relating it to something that we know or that we're familiar with. So that's what I keep telling everyone. But if someone were to stop me and be okay, so is there a specific research, or what specifically are you using? I'm gonna I'll get back to you on that. So I think in that sense it will be great, because I imagine that's something that they provided during the training, right? More specific as to how I guess you can explain what you're doing,
right?
And
so every single one of the trainings was use your theoretical base that you're most comfortable with as a therapist. And I'm most comfortable with cognitive behavioral therapy. So I take the cognitive behavioral therapy goals that my individuals have, and we implement them through their characters. So if they are somebody who doesn't stand up for themselves a lot, and they need to advocate for themselves more because they have kind of low self-esteem and think that they're not right for whatever X, Y, and Z reason. We have their character advocate at some point in time during the game, right? I create those scenarios where the king is only going to talk to that one person. So you have to advocate for whatever your needs are or whatever you want in the game. A lot of it happens organically because D&D is just such a open world. I mean, there's a reason why therapists are trained in role play as well. It's role play. That is also a theoretically based, research backed, form of therapy, right? Is role playing a scenario back and forth so that the person is practicing it. And so when they go out into the real world, they have already practiced it, and hopefully it's a little bit easier to access and follow through with, right? And so, and this is, they're practicing these things. Maybe they're finding out their identity. I know some people have, tried to figure out sexual identity, gender identity, like, all those things through their characters as well. And it's a no consequence zone, right? Like, yeah, your character may die, but like, you're okay. Not going to get fired by your boss, or, your best friend's not going to leave you, or, your husband's not going to leave you for whatever X, Y, and Z reason, right? It's a game. And so it's safe. It's safe to try these things out. And it's amazing to watch.
Right. And I think maybe like doing it as a therapy session as well, it will add an extra element of like safety, I would think, because then there's like that, like, no judgment, or if like they get stuck, then you are completely qualified to help them out, or like guide them through it, or like stop the game for a little bit if they need like a little extra support or whatever. So because I started playing D&D with my brother and his friends, but I'm still sort of like learning, and I actually started playing because he had talked to me about it for about 2 years before I started playing. But then I was like on YouTube, but I don't know what happened. I ended up coming across a video that was talking about how helpful D&D can be, like as a therapeutic tool. And I was like, what? And then so I started like looking for more videos online, and there were a few out there, and I was like, wait a minute, this changes people's lives? Like, what's going on over here? And then that's when I sort of like started creating my website, because there's so much in the geek culture in general that we identify so much. It helps us in our own sort of like personal struggles. And I'm like, so why not use that in therapy as well? Right?
So it helps you communicate, it helps you relate, right? Like, and that's the single most thing that I see in therapy, like the single most problem or whatever is that people feel alone. They feel like they're the only ones feeling what they're feeling or going through what they're going through. And if you use, I always felt this way about music too, if you use geek culture, that's something that's really popular, or a character that's really popular like Spock, there are people who identify with that character for some reason or another. And so then you're not alone, right? Like, you automatically have people who feel, it's probably somewhere similar to where you do, because it's a well-known thing, right? So then you're not alone. And then I actually, if you think about Spock, like, first off, Spock, like original series Spock, he hated his emotions, absolutely hated it, didn't want to feel them, thought they were a nuisance, wanted logic, all the logic, right? I had a client tell me, oh, I identify with Spock. And I was like, that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense, because they were on the autism spectrum. They hated their emotions. They were overwhelming. They didn't like them. They just wanted to stick with the more logical side, which is my favorite part of, autism spectrum stuff, neurodivergence, and is at the starting point where Spock was, where it's like, okay, I'm now I have to accept that I have these emotions. I don't like them, but now I have to learn how to live with them, and then maybe even thrive and use them as a strength in certain situations. So if you know Spock's entire character arc, right? I was like, that's exactly what I said to the client. I was like, you got to go through that character arc. Like, you've got to learn how to live with them, because I'm sorry, you're human and you have emotions.
Right. Yeah, they're going to be there whether you like them or not.
Yeah, they're going to pop up.
So,
So
I'm kind of cheating a little bit because I know this, we had this conversation before, but I want you to talk about it again.
no, you're fine.
Have you done any panels at conventions talking about this?
I did a virtual panel with Dr. Bean from Geek Therapeutics. I can't remember what the actual I think it was Geek Fest, something like that. That was my first panel. And I've been trying to apply for panels and things like that. It's a process, it's a learning process. And of course, I just started my private practice, or I rebranded my private practice to include RPGs just last year. So like in May or June of last year. So I have been applying for panels, and there's calls for papers now and all sorts of stuff that I'm trying to get into. I have a podcast. So I actually applied for, I guess this is okay to say this. I'm gonna say it. I applied for a panel. I won't say what the thing is yet, the actual con, but we got accepted, and it'll be presenting at and it's another virtual one. And so I definitely, that's something that I enjoy doing, is sharing this information, because it's like, the more, again, every time I talk to a gamer, they go, oh my God, that is an amazing idea. That is the best idea ever. Because if you're, especially if you're an RPG player, you know, you build your character, and then like 3 years later, after you play them for 3 years, you go, oh yeah, I was going through that at that time, and that's why I built that character. I'm like, okay, we just want to do that just more mindfully instead of having to wait 3 years to figure out what the benefit was.
So to apply for like a panel, you just sort of like go to the conventions like website, and they have like the application.
Yeah. So
what's that process like?
Yeah, it's usually, I think, a good 6 months before. Again, this is a new process for me as well, so I apologize if I get this wrong. It's usually a couple months to 6 months before the convention happens. And you go in, and they usually have a form where you just kind of, who are you? What's the panel? Give them an abstract, whatever. And then they decide on who's going to present and who isn't. Right. I tried to present back at PAX Unplugged last year, but there were so many, because it was the first one back in person. There were so many people that applied for panels, and so I didn't get that one, but it's definitely something that I'm pursuing, because it's fun to interact with the community as a whole.
Well, and the way I see it, like that's kind of the reason why I created like my website and my social media, and why I'm doing these videos, because there aren't a lot of people out there who know about this, who know that this is a possibility, who they can reach out to, because it's kind of overwhelming. Like once you decide that, yeah, you're going to reach out to a therapist, then you're like, and what therapist? Or like, am I going to have to sit on the couch? Like, what kind of therapy are they going to be doing? Because our portrayal in the media of therapists is not the best, but that just happens to be sort of like, for a lot of people, the only source of, what happens in therapy kind of thing. And some people are not completely ready to like, talk in depth about their trauma, or like, whatever problems they're facing at that time. But maybe through a game, they'll become more comfortable, right? So like,
Yeah.
I think that it's great that, you know, I know there's a lot of like other therapists as well who do this for different conventions. And I was like, yes, this is great. We need to do more of this. We need to be everywhere,
Yeah.
telling people everything.
Well, and that's what the mission of Nerd Adventure Therapy 20 is, to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health treatment and mental health in general through RPGs and gaming and nerd culture, because it's just there's so many people out there that not only do they not know who to go to or how to find a therapist or whatever, but some people find one and they're not great. There's some horror stories that I get, you know, from people. And that's the thing is, you know, in my experience, there was somebody who had a horrible experience with a therapist and was refusing to do therapy, but really, really needed it, but was willing to do the therapeutic D&D game. And once they got into the therapeutic D&D game, got used to me, they were like, oh, by the way, do you have any individual spots open? I was like, yes, I do, in fact. So I see it as an access point too, an unintimidating, fun access point to mental health care that isn't as, you know, intimidating to access, right? Yeah, you look on my profile and you see my blue hair and you see all the memes that I put on my Facebook page, you know exactly what you're getting, right? And that's sometimes the scariest part, like you said, is finding a therapist that even fits you is even harder, right?
Right. And I think now it's changing a little bit. There's a lot more therapists who are online, who are a bit more open about who they are and what they do, kind of thing. But like when I was in school, a lot of my professors was like, yeah, don't have a social media, don't post anything, don't do anything online. And I'm like,
you have to be
but
stoic.
how are we supposed to provide this information? It's like, that's the reason why there's so much misinformation out there, because we're not putting it out there. And the people who are not well trained, or they're not well informed.
Right.
And then, so nobody's going to therapy, or like, you know, that's why you get the stereotypes and all that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is like, I think the profession has a lot of growing to do as well. Just mental health therapy, you know, in general, that the suit professional is not, you don't have to be that as a therapist, unless it fits you, right? And that's
Right,
the whole
yes.
point of therapy, and that's why people find you, is because they need a connection in some way, shape, or form. And if you're a formal person, then you find a formal therapist. But if you're not a formal person and you don't want to go see a suit, like, you want to find somebody that you can relate to. And same thing through my schooling, which was a little bit longer ago than yours. It was the same thing. You can't show personality. You can't laugh. You can't joke. You can't, you know, be a person. And that's never how I've ever done therapy. And it always has worked out better when I was more true to myself. Because how are you going to teach somebody to be true to themselves when you're not being true to yourself? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Right. So I know there are certain instances, certain diagnoses that you work with and things like that, where you do have to be very professional, very boundary setting, you know, all those things. And that's absolutely fine. We need those people, right? I'm just not one of them. I'm just not one of those type of therapists. And I am perfectly fine with referring out to someone who is that therapist, right? Not that it's a negative thing. And I don't want anybody to take it that way. It's not a negative thing to be a formal therapist.
Yes, and I think I completely agree with you. Like, I think that's why we need so many different types of therapists, and I think that's why people need to be aware that they are completely different type of therapists. So if you go to a therapist, it's completely okay for you to say, you know, this isn't working out, I need to find someone else, because it's all about the connection you have with someone. And if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. You don't have to force it, right? And like, that's why we, you know, we talk to each other as therapists, so we can make referrals and be like, you know, I don't have expertise, or I don't feel comfortable doing this. I feel like you'd be better off, you know, with a colleague of mine.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So if somebody was interested in reaching out to you for therapy or just wanted to see some of your posts or what you have out there, like where can they find you?
You can find me at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at NAT20 Therapy. And then you can, I have a website. It's www.nat20therapy.com. You see the theme here. I also have a podcast named Mental Health Quest, the Therapist Office and Beyond. And you can find, I'm there with my co-host Benjamin. We go over diagnoses and how to access care and things like that. It's really a lot of fun. If you want to know any information about, therapy in general, that's what we cover. So those are pretty much the places you can find me. You can find my email on my website and things like that.
For the podcast, is that can they find that on your website as well, or is that on a separate thing?
Yes, you can find it on my website under resources. And you can actually, it's on iTunes, it's on Google, it's on Amazon, it's all over the place. We have it on like every platform. I was like, every single one, yes, please.
So earlier we sort of talked about, or you mentioned, how trainings can be a little bit expensive, and sometimes it might be best to just, at that time to consult with someone. Is that something that you do on a regular basis?
I'm starting to offer that service for my company as well, NAT20 Therapy. Because I just, again, it's really expensive to do the training. So I know there's that kind of paywall there. So yeah, I don't mind people consulting with me. It's still, a lot of the times it's still paid, but not as much as what you have to pay for an entire certification program. So yes, I do offer that. I also am, in Maryland at least, board certified supervisor for clinical social workers. So if somebody needs their hours to become a clinical social worker, I also am a board certified supervisor.
It's a good thing that you mentioned what state you're in, because
yes,
I kind of
I'm in
forgot to
Maryland.
ask you. Yeah, is that the only state that you're can get clients from? Or
currently, yes. Right now, and I'm very excited about it, the NASW is working with all of the social work boards across a whole bunch of states to get a compact ready, so that whatever state signed the compact, you actually will be able to practice across those state lines. Yeah, so I think counselors have one in place right now. I know psychologists, I think, had one too. Social workers, I think, were last, but we're hoping to get that ready and out the door, or at least that's what the NASW said. They're hoping to get it ready and out the door by 2023. So right now I can only practice in Maryland, but once that compact passes, and if I go under that compact, then I will be able to practice in whatever state joins the compact.
that's great. You can see it makes it a lot easier, right? Like to find someone.
Well, and that's the thing is like over here, on the East Coast, we have like per mile, we have 20 therapists, right? Towards the center of the country where it's a little bit more spread out, you don't have as many therapists, you don't have as many resources. So being able to, access someone who might be on the East Coast, even if you're in the center of the country or, the western part of the country, it creates more opportunity for people to receive standard care.
And kind of what we were talking about before, right? Like it makes it a lot easier for you to find someone who you can connect with,
right?
And feel comfortable, and that's the type of therapy that you're looking for.
Yeah, because right now it's just like, I have people contacting me from out of state, like, oh, hey, this sounds awesome, we should do it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. It's just Maryland right now. And just to let people know, there are other therapists that are licensed in different states, but you have to pay for each individual license through the state and apply for each individual license through the state, which is at least $300 a pop usually. So that's why the compact is really, really important, because none of us therapists can afford 50 states worth of
Right. Yes.
licensing fees. So.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your, your journey opening up your own practice and how you came up with the name. And you basically just answer all the questions that I had planned for you. So that was fantastic. Thank you.
I was going to say, sorry, you didn't actually get to answer questions.
No, this is great. I was just here to make sure that we were recording. That's all I needed. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here. I'll be around.
So I hope you liked that and learned a lot. I know for sure I did. I am very interested in doing panels, and I think we need to continue doing that as therapists as a profession. So yeah, I have tons of more of these videos planned for everyone. So if you're interested in learning more, you can subscribe to my channel, Psychology for Geeks. You can also, hit that bell notification thing, so you can be notified when I post another video. I have other videos that I do as well, where I talk about movies or anime, also TTRPGs, a bunch of other things. You can check out my other videos in the meantime. You can also check out my website, psychologyforgeeks.com, and my social media at Superpower Toolkit. So yeah, I hope you enjoy that, and don't forget to leave a like or a comment. That way I know what sort of information you're interested in, and that way I can make more videos on the fandoms and the stuff that you're interested in. So yeah, don't forget to reframe and re-enchant your life, and I'll see you guys next time.